The NFL 2023 schedule is being released today. But what does that mean for your fantasy football drafts? What does that mean for your best ball drafts? Are there certain players you should target? Are there certain games you should target? How do you factor in strength of schedule? How do you factor in week 17 matchups? That's what we're going to cover here today on Legendary Sickos, a Legendary Upside and Spike Week collaboration. Myself and Pat Kerrane, founder of Legendary Upside, Best Ball Mania 3 winner. We're going to dive into everything you need to know about the NFL schedule, week 17, and all things best ball. Let's do it. So I like to give away a little bit of behind the scenes goods, and I feel like it's very fitting for your brand, even though it was not a technical difficulty. We're on version 2 of this podcast episode, and it's because this time Pat's internet was great. It was so great, in fact.
It was so great.
It was so great, in fact, that the guy who came to work on his house was just coming through loud and clear in the recording that we were trying to do. So people will enjoy that, right? Freeze frame Kerrane became famous last year, and there was no freeze frame. It was just somebody came in to work on his. I
had a guy house. Come into the backyard, yeah. So it's not like working on. I don't own this place, but like I need to let a dude in, and he's doing stuff in the backyard, and yeah, it wasn't great timing for that. About 20 minutes of our lives is gone. This is take 2.
Yes, take 2. It was very funny though. But so what we're going to get into today is the NFL schedule. Obviously, you see it on the thumbnail. You heard it in the intro. But I think it's being released tonight. I'm excited for it. We all get excited for it. In particular, if you play best ball, you're excited for things like the week 17 matchups and the playoff schedule. But I do think it's important to go over kind of a general strategy. What does the schedule really mean, right? How do we tackle that week 17 thing? How do we tackle the playoff schedule on a site maybe like Drafters? How do we tackle the whole schedule, right? In a cumulative format, week 17 really doesn't matter any more than any other week. But is there any levers we can pull across the entire week 17 schedule? God forbid you're trying to go after the regular season prize in Best Ball Mania 4. Is there anything you can do? We're going to cover anything schedule related here today and how you should use it in your drafts. Super quick before we dive in, though, some quick housekeeping. If you are a Legendary Upside subscriber, you get a pretty sweet deal if you're playing best ball. Obviously, Pat is offering a ton of different promotions, giveaways. I don't know how he's making any money. I guess he doesn't need it, but I don't know how he's making any money this year. But we're also working on a partnership between Spike Week and Legendary Upside. If you use promo code LEGUP, there'll also be a link in the description. You will get 40% off of any Spike Week subscription. So right now, our NFL package is $300, which will take you all the way through the Super Bowl, right? So you want to play playoff best ball. There's in-season best ball. There's all sorts of stuff. We will get you covered for $300 normally, but you get 40% off. So you're getting about $120 off of your subscription just for being a Leg Up subscriber. You don't have to do anything else. You don't got to sign up anywhere or whatever. You just have to subscribe to Pat and you'll get 40% off of Spike Week. So again, description there. And I did this on the first take, and so I'm making sure that I don't miss anything. Pat, what a housekeeping promo you have before we dive into the schedule.
Yep. Use promo code LEGUP as well if you're signed up for Spike Week. And if you signed up for Spike Week like recently, you can do that, right? But if you sign up under the old pricing, then you're not eligible for the 40% off because, Erik is trying to run a successful business. He does seem to care about money that comes in. So
yeah. I do have, as everyone sees that's ever watched a show that I do, 2 large dogs who eat a lot of food and have a lot of energy. And I love everyone that subscribed before, and we did grandfather you in at the old price. I appreciate you guys, but I can't also give you 40% off of that old price. We would probably go out of business and my dogs would starve. So appreciate everyone, but for the rest of this summer, I think we're going to have a lot of fun regardless.
For sure.
in the whole best ball streets.
Yeah, and so if you were thinking about signing up for Spike Week, I would highly encourage you to go to legendaryupside.com/early, where I'm offering $30 off your first year. So for $69, you can sign up for me and then unlock a $120 discount off of the yearly Spike Week subscription off of the NFL package. I mean, so it's more than what it costs to sign up for me. So at this point, it's just financially responsible to sign up for my site. Also, you can get a $50 underdog credit. There are a limited amount of those, but if you sign up and then you got to fill out a form so that I have your username to send to Underdog, I'll put a link to the page with that form in the description. But once you do that, once you're signed up, you can get $50 deposited into your Underdog account. There are a limited amount of those, so you got to do that pretty quickly. This is an evergreen episode, so I don't know if you're listening to this in mid-June. I'm not sure, but for right now, you should be good. You will be good if you sign up, shortly after hearing this.
Yeah, if you're one of the people that wait to draft your best ball teams, which I don't know how people do that. I understand the ideas of drafting early versus drafting late versus all that different stuff. But man, if you enjoy fantasy football, now that we have all these options, I don't know how to not draft like basically throughout the whole summer. So make sure you get in early so you can take advantage of everything that Pat is offering. But today we're going to talk about not just the 2023 schedule, of course, a little bit about that as that is being released tonight, but what does the schedule really mean? And where I want to start is actually at the end. We'll get to a little bit of the collective schedule and some different things we can do, strength of schedule. I have some specific questions that I want to pick Pat's brain on. But the most popular subject that everybody probably wants to hear about is week 17. And so if you're just getting started in best ball and you're not aware, in the playoff formats like Best Ball Mania, like everything on DraftKings, I believe FFPC is the same way. You have to navigate your way through the regular season and through a couple of playoff rounds and make it to the championship in week 17. And so we'll often talk a lot about correlations and matchups of week 17 and things like that, because basically all the money that gets distributed for like everything we're talking about right now is going to be decided upon the results of week 17. It sounds crazy, but that is what it is. Congrats. You drafted Justin Jefferson last year. He was an absolute smash. You drafted Josh Jacobs, absolute smash. Those guys didn't do anything in week 17. They didn't help you. It's not to say don't draft them. Of course you should, but just think about how these kinds of results can change so drastically based on that 1 week and how much money is given out in prizes based on that 1 week. So as we already had a little bit of the NFL's cheating. They're slowly dripping out the schedule. We have one particularly juicy match.
And drafters are taking notice. They have noticed that the Chiefs are playing the Bengals. That is
if you
affecting drafts.
If you are in the Spike Week Discord in particular, every time there's a tweet from any account ever that has any matchup, I don't care if it's like week 6, it's getting posted. Like people are like, oh, let's stack the Dolphins and the Patriots in week 6. I'm exaggerating, but it's like everybody is so anxious for the schedule.
No, what it is that people are going, don't draft Dolphins. There's now half the chance that they're in week 17. Don't draft.
Yeah, right.
That's what it is.
Yes, people have been galaxy braining, divisional matchups and all that kind of stuff in their team. So look, I get it. I support the part of this show's name has sicko in it. So I support all of that mental illness that you have related to best ball.
We can still recognize it though. We can still.
Yes.
Let's just understand who we are.
I am a man of many flaws, and I don't really care that I have those flaws, but I also exist. I also understand that they exist. But week 17, obviously Pat's team last year that won Best Ball Mania had a ton of week 17 correlation. So I just wanted to kind of pick Pat's brain a little bit on how now that maybe the market also is getting into week 17 a little bit more, but how are you thinking about it as we head into the schedule release, but also your drafts post schedule release?
Yeah, I think there's like two conflicting things here. So Adam Levitan had a tweet today saying like, yes, week 17 correlation is important, but like it's probably not even the top 5 things that, we're looking to do. It's much more important to be paying attention to your draft capital and ADP values, proper construction, regular stacking, like all that stuff's more important. And I think that's right. Like I think the week 17 correlation is not something where you want to necessarily like build your whole draft around it, particularly if you're going to chase like one of these popular game stacks. I think you're probably like leaving a lot of expected value on the table because you're going to do things like reach or sacrifice, your own player evaluation to take guys way ahead of value. Like I don't really, I'm a little bit nervous about where Kadarius Toney is going to go in drafts. Am I going to be reaching ahead of his like elevated ADP that's I'll probably reach some to get some. I don't want to be completely underexposed to a hyper athletic player on the Chiefs in a great matchup week 17. But at the same time, like I do think you don't want to just throw out a lot of the really other important stuff. The thing that's conflicting with that, though, is that fundamentally what we're doing is we are playing a 1-week DFS tournament. And there's 3 qualifying rounds to get a ticket to that tournament. If you don't get a ticket to that tournament, basically the whole year for Best Ball Mania was kind of a bust. Like unless you happen to finish very high in the overall regular season. But a lot of those regular season prizes are really just kind of like sweeteners, kind of getting some of your money back type of stuff. Like, the big top prize and the second biggest prize is in week 17. I think that's still what we're chasing. We talked about that last week. You got to get a ticket to that tournament. And when you get a ticket to the tournament, you have to have a team that feels and is, pretty live to win, and where maybe a couple things go your way and all of a sudden you're vaulted to the top of the leaderboard. And that's where week 17 correlation is absolutely crucial. But in the same way that you wouldn't just like draft a team like of only rookies and players who you think are going to be peaking in week 17, right? You wouldn't draft a team that's like sacrificing all this stuff to just get week 17 correlation, because you do in fact have to advance out of a 12-team league. Then you have to win 2 straight weeks of finishing first out of a 16-team field. So you have to be able to balance both of these ideas in your mind at once. And I think for me, like in some ways, understanding that correlation isn't the most important thing doesn't mean that you have to like do it less. In some ways, you can almost do it more, but you're doing it in ways that let the draft kind of dictate it to you. So like on my winning Best Ball Mania 3 team, I had DJ Moore and Chris Godwin, but I also had George Kittle, and Trey Lance did not get back to me in the 7th round. I'm fairly certain that I would have taken Trey Lance.
No,
George Kittle. I would have.
No way. You take us taking Trey Lance for 2 years, just 2 years in a row. What could possibly go wrong?
It would have been a $2 million mistake, but I would have done it. I would have done it happily. Yeah.
This is really funny, but it's actually like the perfect lesson in like correlation. You're like, I preferred Trey Lance, and there's nothing wrong with that. Say whatever the Trey Lance haters want.
I had Kittle,
but the way that this draft play, you're like, my player take was X, but the draft played out this way, so I did Y because of this correlation, or largely in part because of this correlation, and boom, $2 million.
Right. So I didn't have a quarterback. So through 7 rounds, I didn't have a quarterback. I took Hunter Renfrow instead of the Lance pick, right? But Hunter Renfrow was correlated with George Kittle. Now that went down as this like hilarious little mini like holy shit, Pat really bought into week 17 thing, which is true, I did. But it also did create another out for me where I could have drafted Derek Carr later in the draft, because now I've got Derek Carr to Hunter Renfrow with a George Kittle bring back. I didn't end up doing that, but I don't mind having that little mini correlation in there. That game actually went off. That game was one of the games that had points. Now those guys didn't really do a ton in week 17, but you kind of like directionally accurate actually to have that mini. But I had another mini already set up, DJ Moore to Chris Godwin, and that made tacking on Tom Brady very easy. And that little trio was absolutely massive. That was kind of the trio that you needed. Or certainly if I had Mike Evans, that would have been even better, but he went ahead of my pick in the second round. But then, I was able to tack on Daniel Jones. I started my draft with Barkley in the second. I grabbed Daniel Jones. I grabbed Wan'Dale Robinson. I had Jalen Waddle early on. I grabbed Tua to stack with him. I ended up grabbing the Dolphins running backs. I got Mike Gesicki late. I got a couple different Patriots, Jacoby Myers, Tyquan Thornton. All of those guys were cheap, and I wasn't like going out of my way to do any of that stuff, really. Like, I was keeping it in mind, like this didn't happen by accident, but I wasn't like reaching way ahead. I mean, Tyquan Thornton was my last pick. The two Dolphins guys were my 16 and 17 round picks. So, I didn't like press. So I think the big thing is like, you want to let the draft kind of give you the correlation a little bit. Don't press and force the correlation. That's where you're probably giving up a lot of edges. But my personal feeling on it is, to the extent that you're not giving up any of those edges, you do want to add about as much correlation as you can and break pretty much every tie towards correlation, because it will actually add flexibility for you throughout the draft, where you can go, you know what? I don't need to reach on this quarterback because I have another thing set up. Like, this is why am I going to reach 12 picks ahead of ADP on this quarterback who I don't even like that much, and I'll just wait. I might be able to get this other quarterback who's basically the same dude, and he more lines up with the next pick that I have.
That's a big one. We don't have to get into that today, but I've been stressing that fairly frequently. It's, again, these are all things that are, in this totem pole or this decision tree or whatever. When I get to 2 4th-round wide receivers, not only does it work in this week 17 and correlation aspect, and this is, I guess, another form of correlation, but right, I get to the 4th or 5th round, I didn't take one of the elite wide receivers, and I'm deciding between someone whose quarterback is an elite wide receiver or someone else. I can break the tie with Terry McLaurin or Christian Watson or whatever, right? One of those guys, Mike Williams, as opposed to taking now DJ Moore because Justin Fields is gone, right? And I can, and you don't have to do that. I'm not saying never take DJ Moore because you don't have Justin Fields. I'm saying when you're building out your portfolio, this is one way to add some of that flexibility. From a week 17 perspective, totally couldn't agree more with everything that you said. And I kind of think about it with two different things. And as you said, a lot of these things are like very conflicting. Week 17 has to be the simplest concept in like that I can like ever remember in fantasy football, that yet has so much nuance, and like kind of it's nuance in when you're in the draft and like implementing it. The concept is like super easy. Like, okay, we understand game stacking. We understand everything Pat described about how to take down the tournament. Obviously, boom, game stack makes sense. But once you get in the draft and you have to click the buttons and make the decisions, there really is a lot of nuance to it. And so two kind of not necessarily misnomers, but sometimes things that people miss. Piggybacking on what Pat said, the first is our goal is not to predict the highest scoring games in week 17. It is May 11th. These games are happening on New Year's Eve. Like, we are so far away. And if you if you think you can predict all those, it seems right now like Chiefs Bengals, how could it fail? Right? How could it fail? You still have to get the right players. If it's Travis Kelce and Jamar Chase, that both are the guys that go off, guess what? You cannot physically get both of them in the same draft. So drafting Kadarius Toney on that team, might have been the right idea, but it didn't. That didn't matter because there's nuance to how the results play out. Plus, things change. Remember the Ravens 2 years ago? Came into the season. We were excited about the Ravens offense, right? Lamar, Bateman, Andrews, J.K. Dobbins. Well, then Dobbins and Gus Edwards both got hurt in the preseason. But we also thought that they were going to run a lot and their defense was going to be really strong because it's the Ravens. Their defense is always good, right? Their whole defense got wiped out. The secondary was like a bunch of XFL guys. They were getting wrecked. And then Lamar got hurt. So Tyler Huntley starting. This is actually what spurred the Mark Andrews breakout that year was, they're not going to throw that much. We have to take Mark Andrews in the 5th or 6th round because he's not going to get that much volume, even though we know he dominates targets, right?
Right.
But their defense, blah, blah, blah. It's just an example of we're going to get so much wrong. And it's not even that we were wrong. Injuries happen, right? God forbid.
Well, that's
Go ahead.
I think the Ravens element of that is kind of the important one to consider, because I don't think that I don't really want to make the case that like Bills Bengals is going to fail, because I don't think that it is, even with the chaos of the NFL season and everything. I mean, unless, one of the quarterbacks gets hurt or something, or there's massive offensive line injuries for one of the teams, and that type of stuff can happen. But, those teams are going to be good and they're going to put up a fair amount of points. But what if they only put up what if it's 27-24, And I think to the Ravens point, like, we don't really know which defense are going to be just like absolute pass funnels by the end of the year, but there will be some, and they're going to play another team, and so you got, I think, by just having a lot of different week 17 games correlated, you're giving yourself, exposure to those types of outcomes where, there's like, hey, I had this team, and like, maybe they didn't even have that good of a season. I mean, this was another thing with my team, right? Like Brady to Chris Godwin with DJ Moore coming back, that didn't work like at all ever, except the 1 week. But it worked that week, and that was the week that mattered. So, if you happen to have a team, if you're able to like sneak a team through that is, you got like a couple pieces on it, and they're playing, and you have those guys stacked, like, maybe the guys who got you there aren't even those guys, but just having the potential for like, well, this weird, gross game went off and you've got like 3 or 4 pieces from it can be a huge differentiator, because those types of guys won't have gotten teams to the finals. And that means they're not going to be well represented in the finals, right? Like if you think about how we get to the finals, you have to finish first, or you have to finish first or second in your 12-team league. That's going to generate a ton of dudes, a ton of different players, right? But then first out of 16, which is higher than last year. Last year was first out of 10. So first out of 16, that's a pretty high bar. Then first out of 16 again. I would expect that we have got, last year we had Justin Jefferson, I think, on 41% of teams, and George Kittle was on 38% of teams. And we had a bunch of different dudes who were on, I think 14 players were on at least 20% of the Best Ball Mania 3 rosters. Given that it's 1 out of 16 and 1 out of 16, I would expect that those numbers to be higher. It's going to be even chalkier.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so actually having pieces of, lots of different games in your portfolio will be important, I think, because maybe, again, you're going to have to get very, very lucky for any of this stuff to actually pay off. But it's that you want a ticket where you go in and you go, like, I did not think my team had really any chance when I was looking at week 17. I was like, this is a fun little.
Neither did I.
Neither did I. It was a fun little lotto ticket. But because I was like, I need like Tom Brady and I need Tom Brady and the Dolphins Patriots game to go off. Like, that's not happening. Yep. But like, I had a path that the nice thing about it, I was on Liam Murphy's show and I was like, hey man, I know what needs to happen. I need this stack to go off and this game to go off. And they both did. And then I also had Austin Eckler go absolutely nuts, so you need more than just those two things, but it wasn't a ton more than that. It wasn't a ton more. So, all of these things, they are kind of micro edges, but it really is just about making sure, hey, if you get lucky enough to have a team in the week 17 final, at least have a potential for 3 or 4 things really go your way. And that's enough. You don't need to like hit the total nuts in week 17. You just, you get lucky in a couple different areas instead of like 9.
Well, and that's the thing is these are still small field DFS tournaments. And like in the grand scheme of things, there's like you said, you didn't even need Mike Evans in Best Ball Mania last year because he was so low represented that even the monster score he put up, the couple of teams that did have him didn't have enough around him in order for him to help propel them to the very top. Now, the larger the field, the more that changes, right? Mike Evans was on, like the DraftKings Millie team and all that. And so there's nuance to that. We talked a little bit about that last week, but two things. One, this is me going off on a tangent. So people, you can fast forward. the whole getting lucky thing is like a pet peeve where people will say, Pat just said, you're going to have to get very lucky, blah, 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 to win this. People will use that like and kind of throw it in your face when you start to discuss some of these kind of more galaxy brain or these micro edges. You said it perfectly. These are micro edges. We know that we have to get lucky. And so what we're trying to do is plan around how do we maximize our win probability when we can get lucky, right? If I'm trying to set up, so like if I do get lucky, I know I'm probably not going to. Guess what? No one is probably going to. There's only one person that gets to win the tournament. 2 people get $1 million. If I were to get lucky, I want first, right? I want first place. And that's exactly what happened on your team. You constructed it in such a way that it was the week of, and you were like, oh God, Bucks, Panthers, and Patriots.
Wouldn't have picked it.
Like, yeah,
I had 4 teams in the semifinals. It might have been my 4th choice.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe with the correlation, it would have been my 2nd or 3rd choice. I don't think it would have been my 1st choice because it was just, I would have gone, yeah, it's correlated, but with what? Gross.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like Tua was hurt. Tom Brady was horrible all year. The Patriots were one of the worst offenses in the league. And there was actually a bunch of pretty good defenses on those teams. You would just never pick that. But it was constructed in such a way and that when you got lucky, it takes first. And that's the whole goal about all these little micro edges. And that's also the goal about week 17 and any schedule related thing. It is not the edge is drafting the best players. We know that, right? That is inherently but I don't have a crystal ball. I didn't know that Mike Evans. I would have drafted a little more Mike Evans. Shocker, I drafted 0. I would have drafted a little more Mike Evans if you'd have told me he was going to score 50 points in week 17. But we don't know that. So you construct the teams in a way in which, right, draft like you're right, draft like you just got lucky. And how would you construct that team if you got lucky around a couple of different things? That's it. And then
but it is important, and I think this is going to be more important than it was last year to have leverage in the finals.
Definitely.
And I think there's a couple different things you can do to try to get leverage. I just had an article out about elite tight end, which I think has the potential to give you leverage. I mean, I think one reason that I was able to get in with this Tom Brady stack was because George Kittle went off for 2 straight weeks and got me into the finals. When a tight end does that, he's going to bring along a lot of different builds. Elite tight end is a structure that works with other structures. So you don't need to it's like you don't have to use 0 running back or, anchor running back with elite tight end. It works with pretty much everything. It works with 3 quarterbacks. It works with elite quarterback. Like you can do it with anything. So that's the type of build where I think it's going to help you maybe get in some lower owned stuff. But however it happens, you're going to need leverage. And if you get if you have a team that has like a low owned guy in the finals, that's cool. But like what you'd really want is a bunch of low owned players.
Correct.
And if if all of those like low owned players are correlated with one another,
bingo,
then the one thing happens. And that's your leverage instead of like, oh, I've got low on this guy, low on this guy, low on this guy. They're all on different teams. None of them play each other. But like the DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, Tom Brady stack, every single one of those guys was leverage on the field. Then they were correlated, so they went off as a group. And that was the massive part of it. It's not this that I had like a few low owned guys. It's that they were all correlated with one another because the Patriots stuff was low owned as well. So yeah, I think that's and the leverage angle of this is going to be even more important with the first playoff week going from 10 to 16. I do think that's going to change. Maybe it won't dramatically change, but I do think it'll make even more chalky players. The best plays, everyone's going to have the best plays in the week 17 final. That's how they got there. It's
Mark Andrews from two years ago. Mark Andrews was like legitimately like 70% or 60% or something like that in the Best Ball Mania 2 finals, because like you said, now it wasn't as difficult of an advancement structure, but he was the guy. Like if you got to week 17 without him, it was a borderline miracle, because he just went absolutely nuclear for multiple weeks. And it's funny that you say that, because ship chasing co-host Pete Overzet and I had a Best Ball Mania 2 team that made the finals and got 8th that year, and we had a very similar thing to you, where I still don't know how we got there. Honestly, like I look back and I'm like, this team, like, it didn't have that year. For anyone that remembers, Cooper Kupp came from like the 5th round to be the Cooper Kupp that we know today. Mark Andrews went absolutely nuts. I forget, there was some other guys, some running backs again that just kind of smashed. And like, we didn't have any of them. We took like this was before CD broke out. We took like CD and Keenan Allen at the 2-3 turn. They were like just so average. We lost Raheem Mostert on the first snap of the entire season. He was our RB1. Shocker. We drafted a 0 running back team. He was our first running back we picked. Done, week 1. But just like sometimes that's getting lucky. And we did, similarly to you, we planned around a couple of correlations and game stacks and all of that. And you just hope that it hits. I was going to just pull up really quickly, because I have a kind of data representation of what you were talking about with the elite tight end. This is not elite tight end, but I also just wrote about a similar idea with the leverage of the playoffs in mind. And what played out, this is from 2 years ago, and it was double stacking like the elite expensive offenses. And so this instance is with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow. And so in 2021, obviously we had the Mark Andrews and all that different stuff. But what happened was, and I'll post this link in the description as well, and I'm not going to read it to you, but I just wanted to pull up the data to show specifically what Pat is talking about. Bigger? Yes. What Pat is talking about with the, like, specifically how this leverage plays itself out in these scenarios. So if you drafted Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, Joe Burrow had a 16% advance rate, right? Pretty standard. Jamar Chase was a little bit higher. T. Higgins, they were all close enough to a totally average advance rate. Joe Burrow actually went off in both week 16 and week 17, but quarterbacks are just quarterbacks. They're never going to be like so chalky unless in a very random instance. But T. Higgins, despite the fact that Chase was, a little bit better in the regular season, they were close enough, and T went nuts in week 16. He had like 35, 40 fantasy points in week 16. Jamar Chase didn't do anything. But if you constructed your team by drafting both of them into a stack, the finals rate of Burrow and T, there were 160 finals teams in Best Ball Mania 2. 8 of them had Burrow to T, no Chase. Where's the finals? Burrow and Chase, there were 2 out of 160. And so you say, okay, well, yeah, because Chase sucked. It's really, really hard to get him there. This is a little bit of the Mike Evans. But how do you get Mike Evans to the finals in a situation like this? You take all 3 of them. Right. Burrow plus Chase plus T. There was one of them. Now, they didn't win the final, but I do believe they finished really highly. How do you get Burrow was the QB1 and Chase was the wide receiver 1? You stack them. You correlate them, right? And I just want to find really quickly, there was the advance rate of all 3 was a little below average, but not much, right? 12%. 124 of the 1,054 teams that drafted Burrow, Chase, and T got through. So compared to 16%, not awesome, but not really that big of a difference. So you didn't sacrifice advance rate on the whole. It's close enough. And it's a really low owned, only 0.7% of the field drafted Burrow, Chase, and T, right? And so the amount of times, the amount of people that drafted it from a rate perspective also got to the finals. So let's just round up. 1% of people drafted that triple stack or that double stack, and 1% of them got to the finals. So it's like, and you advanced close enough but it's like, seems like such a simple thing, but this is like how do I find leverage? It's like, this is another one of those ways now imagine you do this and you draft the elite tight end. And it's like the elite tight end and T. Higgins can pull you through, or, you could get Pete and I had Kyle Pitts that year as our air quotes, elite tight end that made the final. We got drugged through by Hunter Henry, actually got us there. And that got us Kyle Pitts leverage on Mark Andrews. There's all these different things that we can do. And none of them are like, there's no individual right answer, but I just thought that some of the data was interesting, and your tight end thing was super fascinating. These are the things that we should think about. None of them in a vacuum are like, this is the answer. We saw best ball. But just as you build your whole portfolio and do your drafts, there's these little things that we can do that do like what we were talking about. When I get lucky, how do I get the low owned stack that wins it, as opposed to just, oh, congratulations, you had Josh Jacobs and Justin Jefferson and all in the final, and you're praying for Sony Michel to score 3 touchdowns. Like that's not
that's your lever. Yeah, kind of one guy. Like, well, if this one guy goes off, that'll help me separate. Yeah. So one thing, one lever I think that's important to think about in terms of getting teams to the finals is your late round picks. I think your late round picks are really important, both in terms of helping you get to the finals, helping you win in the finals. KJ Hamler was on Justin Herzig's team.
Yeah,
I think he had a spike week, not in week 16 at the time, the championship week, but I think week 15.
2 touchdowns.
Yep. And so that, imagine if, he took like a quarterback there to help him advance. It's like, I think you actually do really want to be thinking about, okay, I'm going to be drafting guys in these late rounds to help me get to the finals or win in the finals. Amon-Ra St. Brown was huge for Liam's team 2 years ago. Jeff Wilson gave him a spike week on that team to help get him to the finals. Amon-Ra was kind of just like the guy you needed.
Crushed the whole playoffs. Yeah.
Crushed the whole playoffs. But then he had him correlated with Rashad Penny in that final, which, those were the 2 guys that you needed. So thinking through those late round picks as potential engines that get you through is one thing. And that leads me to, and I'm kind of working on something about this, where I'm like, it makes me a little less inclined to want to take that third quarterback, especially if I feel like I don't need to. If I need to take the third quarterback to advance, fine. We have to advance. That is the biggest thing. That's the first thing. It's not the biggest thing, but it's the first thing. If you don't check that box, you're not going anywhere. But if I feel like I'm already good enough at quarterback, and it's more of kind of a luxury advancement rate thing versus taking a swing for the fences, I'm going to want to take that swing for the fences. But the point I want to emphasize is there's no reason not to stack up, the Texans or the Steelers or any of these teams. You can do Patriot stuff. Any of these teams. Another one, a Commanders might be the best example.
Now we're talking. Now we're speaking my language. Yes.
You stack up the Commanders, which is easy to do. And I think pretty much all of their guys are at very palatable prices. I mean, you could go Terry, Dotson, and pick a running back. And I think both running backs are good picks. And then skip the quarterback. Yeah. Just skip it. You don't have to be right about Howell or Brissett.
You should draft Sam Howell, but I know, but I'm just totally trolling. You're absolutely right.
And you know what a nice situation to do this in is, like, if you're going to be if you're taking a Jalen Hurts team, I mean, well, we're about to get the schedule. Maybe they didn't play in week 17.
Oh,
but,
boy.
If that wasn't really let's say take a Josh Allen team, take a Patrick Mahomes team. I mean, you're not really in a position where you need that quarterback in week 17 or probably even in week 16, right? Like, you get your quarterback to maybe a little earlier. You get someone who's just, you feel like, yeah, you're going to play and I didn't have to pay a ton to get you. Perfect. You pair with my elite, you pair with my, early quarterback, whatever. You don't have to stop there. You can keep building in additional correlation. You don't need the quarterback. If a quarterback is having a pretty solid game, he can still power really strong games from other players on the offense, which are more important. You have to fill 3 wide receivers in a flex, 2 running backs.
Happens all the time. The time.
Those are the absolutely massive pieces on your team. Who cares if you don't have the quarterback? Put up 25 points. You didn't have it. Well, your quarterback put up 23 points. Who cares?
Yep.
Get the skill. Get the guys who caught the touchdowns in that performance, and they're hitting your lineup in absolutely crucial spots for your lineup. So continuing to build out correlation. I've actually done stuff like I had a Jalen Hurts team where I just like took all the Chargers. And I was like, good luck, Herbert. I have Hurts, dude. So enjoy it. Enjoy, obviously if I make the finals, that particular team that had Justin Herbert, but like, let's say you roll up with, let's say you roll up in week 17 and you have Justin Herbert and you have him stacked with Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnston. But then there's a Hurts team that is stacked with A.J. Brown, who also has Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston, and Gerald Everett.
You're a huge dog. You're a huge dog with the Herbert team.
Right. So I think thinking about it from like the reverse, like which team would you rather be? The guy who's got the beautiful single stack with Hurts plus this other stack built in? I mean, I think that's kind of a no-brainer.
I totally agree. I did just want to double back while I was thinking about it, and because we talked a little bit about some of these correlations and such, and I did like, as we're thinking about week 17 and those specific matchups, I agree exactly with what you said earlier about I don't think we should plan for Chiefs Bengals to fail. But that doesn't mean we should plan for Chiefs Bengals to automatically be the game you need, right? And in A, there can be chaos of the season, like the Ravens example. But B, we could get to have the Chiefs been the game? You know, the Chiefs are frequently a really fun one to stack up. But like if you played DFS last year, the Chiefs were awesome as an offense all season. And I think a Chiefs game stack won like one tournament, won once the entire season, despite the fact that Mahomes was awesome. Kelsey was awesome, right? Pacheco was awesome. McKinnon was awesome. They were like still not taking down DFS tournaments very frequently. I know there's price involved, but there's price involved.
No, but the price is best ball. The price is the point. If all these players were just in a bag and you got to pick them out and put them in your lineup, like we'd all pick the Chiefs, they're not. You have to pick them based on what everyone else wants them. It's a market-based game. So even though, on DraftKings, they set the prices, it's not a market dictating that, but it kind of, it's like kind of in line with what feels right, so it's driven by performance and all of that. So it's not that dissimilar where like you could think about like what you're spending on this stack, like that Chiefs Bengals stack that you put together is taking up a massive part of your salary in DraftKings terms.
It only is restricted because you can't get Chase and Kelsey together. But like, if you theoretically could, you could spend, if we're talking about like a $200 auction budget, you could spend like $150 of your $200 auction budget on Chiefs Bengals if there was a way to get like the first four, right? Because they all go in the first two rounds. All the good guys from both teams go in the first like two rounds. I guess Burrow is a 3-4 turn, but like, okay, the first 4 rounds, the top 5 players in that game all go there. So
there's not a player under like 7K in that whole stack. That whole first part of the stack.
Yeah, and the secondary guys are like, the most expensive wide receiver from.
Tony's 6.5K now. What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. Tony's not even cheap. But what I was
hopefully the listeners actually play on DraftKings. So we've gone very specific on the DraftKings salary.
Yes. I do that all the time with DFS because that's just like that's where I come from. That's where my brain works, and I realize that I'm probably alienating some people. What I was going to say around that is it's not just like, oh, I'm expecting the Chiefs Bengals to fail, or it's not also even just, oh, they're expensive. It's a combination of all that, plus our inability to predict this far out. It's our inability to predict even once we get to that week. Nonetheless, to be able to predict this far out, or even in August or September, which games are going to be the highest scoring. There is just that inherent variance. If you played the last 2 years, we've talked a bunch about Pat's team. Pat literally said, and I said I agreed, even if we got to that week and you said, I want to like pick my favorite team, it would not have been Bucks, Panthers, Dolphins, Patriots. It certainly, when we're drafting, would not have been that game. No, like all summer, there wasn't a soul that was like, oh baby, can't wait to draft Bucks, Panthers, and Patriots, Dolphins. Like nobody was saying that, but there is that inherent variance. 2 years ago, the same shit happened. Yes, Jamar Chase Yes, Jamar Chase went crazy. So I live right next to an Air Force base, and there's an air show this weekend. So it has been never-ending flyovers, and the dogs like lose their shit.
He was really talking there. That was is he like a hound? That was some real.
He's a husky shepherd. So yeah, that's the husky howling at the moon. That's the husky coming out in him. So that's what we've been dealing with for the last 48 hours. Lots of good sleep. It was 12:30 last night. Still planes flying over the house. It was absolutely awful. But what I was just going to say is, it's not the games that we always expect. And 2 years ago, the same shit happened. This was before everybody kind of knew the Lions were like the Coors Field of fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Lions, Seahawks, like the Seahawks were boring as hell. Still had rust. It was kind of old. I know they were a pretty good offense, but nobody was excited about Seahawks Lions. Nobody. And look, like 80 points in that game or whatever, and the guys you needed, air quotes, were in that game, and so we just can't predict it. And so that's what bleeds into our all these ways that we implement correlation. And like you said with Levitan's tweet, it was absolutely true. It is both important to do and implement in drafts, and simultaneously almost never, or probably never, the number one thing you're looking at when you get on the clock. But a lot of the times, let's say Levitan listed 5 things in his tweet, which is a very good tweet. Let's say it's number 6. The week 17 correlation is the 6th thing that you run down your list that you're making a decision on. Especially as the draft goes on, you're going to reach areas like you did with Tom Brady, like you did with Ramondre or Tyquan Thornton. Like late rounds are a really good example. Where like, what is the difference on all those first 5 things for your 17th round pick? So you're going to get to that correlation, lever pretty easily on some of these picks. Now, in the 3rd round, right, you probably have a stark teardrop. And this year, I certainly do. There's call it the early to mid 3rd round. I'm like, please God, let me pick in like first 4 picks of the 3rd round, because I don't want any
kind
of
of like the middle. I love Mark Andrews, so that's
but then like me. He's gone, and it's Debo and Amari Cooper and Calvin Ridley
like
and too. God damn it, Pat, quit ruining my.
It's the end of the 3rd round
example. Okay, end of the 3rd round. End of the 3rd round to pick your fucking tier break. Okay, whatever you're
middle.
But you obviously, the point is just you get to these tier breaks, and it's a very different way you implement the correlation depending upon kind of your draft selection. It is, I hate calling it a tiebreaker because that I think undersells it. How
about this? How about we pair it with another lever? So like, if you're, one way to do it's like, I'm pairing it with ADP a lot of times. Like for me, it's a way to be like I drafted Tyquan Thornton once last year. It was on this team that won, right? So you know why I drafted Tyquan Thornton? Because that's like where he was going. It was like a pretty solid value to get him in the 18th round, 2nd round pick. But I already had a bunch of Patriots and Dolphins, so it made a ton of sense to let the room tell me, hey, Tyquan Thornton's pretty good value. You never take him, but maybe you should take him here. So you could say, yeah, that's a week 17 correlation play, but it was an ADP play too. So if you can find a way to like kind of marry them together, obviously you're going to feel the best if you're doing week 17 correlation and it's tied to your player evaluation. And you're like, I love this guy and it's correlated. But, you can also do some of the stuff is a little less fun. Like, the kind of the structural stuff, like maybe you're getting pushed off a structure that you feel like really comfortable with, but onto one that also works. So it's like, oh, I'm actually getting more, I'm diversifying my portfolio of structures by going with the week 17 correlation here. And that is something, if you were to like zoom out and be like, do you want to have a diversified portfolio of structures? You'd be like, yes, I do. I don't want to be all in on just this one structure. Well, week 17 correlation came along and helps push you on to whatever it is you don't like doing a ton of. Maybe, you're not a ton of going 0 running back and something fell in your lap, a wide receiver correlation early on. You're like, let's do it. Let me experiment with this, whatever it is. Right. So I think like having it pair up with something else is maybe a different way to think about it rather than just a tiebreaker.
Yep. I think that makes total sense. I think that I would probably even remove it from that totem pole or decision tree. And like you said, it's on the side with arrows pointing to your, like you said, your ranking / player take / projection, whatever the hell you want to call that, right? If you're projection based or rankings based, whatever, it points to your rankings because of course your rankings are important. You don't want to, like you said, take Kadarius Toney in the 5th round when you have him ranked in the 7th round just because of correlation. But you don't want to forego correlation, as you've talked about, and it's it has to play into these other amounts. That's what makes it difficult. It's so simple. We understand correlation, we understand the upside stacking, whatever, but it's also the implementation of it is very difficult. I do want to talk a little bit about overall strength of schedule, overall playoff schedule, and if you have any thoughts on that. But was there anything that you kind of think we missed around like the week 17 conversation? Obviously we spent most of the episode talking about that, but I do think it's the most important part of the whole schedule.
Well, I'll just to kind of wrap up the point we're making on the kind of the order of importance when you're drafting, like some of those things, like the list that Levitan tweeted out, run counter to one another. So like ADP versus your own player rankings, like, well, those could be quite different. And so like, when are you, which are you supposed to decide with? Because there is this thing of like, if you go with the ADP and you get ADP value in a room, Mike Leone showed in his Best Ball Manifesto that that's very helpful to your chances of advancing, and it just raises the EV of your teams to do that. But also, like, we do want to hit on the right players. Like, if you feel very strongly that this guy's like a great value and this guy's a terrible value, so it can be sort of a tiebreaker, within balancing important things to do. So it's like,
I like that.
This guy is the ADP value and he's correlated, or this guy, this guy's an ADP value, but I have a correlated guy who I absolutely love. I'm just taking that guy. Yes. I think that's one way to think through it.
Absolutely. Because like you said, a guy can get to a spot where he's beyond ADP, but still maybe doesn't reach where you have him ranked. Right. The player's going 50th overall. You have him ranked 75th, and you get to pick 62. You're like, pretty getting this guy around after ADP, and maybe you have his quarterback and another guy from his week 17 game. That's where it's kind of being humble about your whole process, is that there's not any one, your player take is not the end all be all. ADP is not the end all be all, and week 17 correlation is not the end all be all, but you're constantly weighing all those different things. And you say, okay, well, in this instance, I'm getting the value on this guy and he's correlated. So I can forego my personal ranking on that player. Right. But then the flip side can also be the truth. Like you said, like, I'm maybe not getting ADP value on Kadarius Toney. Again, we don't want to reach like 2 rounds, whatever, but he's 6 picks ahead ADP. I'm just throwing out numbers. And you have Mahomes and T. Higgins. And I
have very little Kadarius Toney. That was another thing. That's another thing. Wasn't on Levitan's list, but I think is important, and I think he would say it is important as well. You want to not be like totally overweight and underweight beyond what you would want to be. You know what I mean? Like, if you're like, hey, I'd love to have 5% Kadarius Toney. I want to be underweight, but not, even with the field would be 8.3%. 5 would be fine with me, but I don't want to be 1. I mean, the guy's very athletic. I don't want to be 1. So,
and he's on the Chiefs. They traded for him. They don't have any competition. Like, you can not love him, but again, be humble enough to say, I'm willing to accept the fact that he could bury me. He could absolutely bury you.
Yeah. So I don't want to full fade this guy. Yeah. So then, I would also take him in that 6 picks ahead at ADP, and you got it correlated, and like, maybe you need a little bit more exposure. You checked your spike week tools and we're like, oh God, I don't have any Toney. Get him.
This will happen this summer, by the way. Pat and I did a few episodes last summer where we kind of like went through our tools and our exposures, and like, we're only one human. You can't literally spend every waking hour like investigating your best ball portfolio, and you find this all the time.
Yeah,
you're like Chiefs Bengals. You're like, oh, I feel like I've actually been getting a bunch of Chiefs Bengals. You pull it up, you look at your exposure, and you're like, okay, not really, and I don't have any Kadarius. I have 0 Toney teams with a Bengal, and it's like, how the hell did that happen?
You're like, I have 3 naked Toney teams.
Yeah, exactly. Why do I? Or you pull it up, and it's like, my Toney correlation is with Travion Williams. I don't think that that's going to work.
I will find that. I know I will.
I will too. I was just arguing for Travion Williams the other day. That's how disgusting my brain is. But like there's so much that goes into it. And so I'm glad we talked about it for a long time, because like it's just not, I think people want, like most things, to be like this binary answer, super easy and straightforward. And I think that the week 17 thing, while very simple, is about as clear as mud in terms of being able to explain it. Like, how does it work when you implement it? Because I mean, we just spent 45 minutes being like, well, it's like an if then statement. It's like you're constantly having to adjust, you know, when certain things matter more, and balancing different things. And so that's fantasy
and you can
football.
mix it up. You'd be like, you know, and some of this stuff's kind of coin flippy type of stuff where you're like, should I take this guy? It's like, you know, I've been reaching a little bit to complete stacks. I'm gonna push it. You know,
yeah.
Or I'm constantly getting sniped, and I would just like to have a stack team, you know, for once in my life. Like, all right, get your stack then, dude.
Right.
Like, you know, I think it's all right to just kind of let your emotions in that particular moment kind of guide you, because I mean, this is kind of a fun enterprise, hopefully, and you don't want to get like just, you know, frozen, like, oh, there's too many variables. What do I do? So
yeah, this is way too time consuming, and we're putting money in May, and we're not going to get it out till 2024. You know, like if you're not getting something out of this,
right.
And whether that's fun or whether, you know, you're a spreadsheet robot, at least like if you're kind of, even if you're like kind of robotic, you should be like at least like achieving goals, right? Like as opposed to just like clicking buttons for, I mean, how many times are you going to draft by, you know, September? Like we can get something out of this. Plus,
enjoy it.
as long as you're not doing anything like totally egregious, like we're going to talk a lot about best ball over the course of the summer. There's no right or wrong. And so as long as you're not doing something totally crazy, like what was it? A friend of the show, Neil Farley, posted. Was this real or not real? That Davis accidentally took Alberto first over.
I think he found a team that took Alberto 101 and then said it was Davis. And apparently Davis was then convinced that maybe it was him, and he'd forgotten. Which, I mean, at that point, I think it really might have been Davis.
Yes, that is also an incredible bit that, you know, he doesn't actually, like, it's conceivable that he did actually draft out. Even to him, it's conceivable.
Well,
that
Pete Overzet, of course, had the best reply to the whole thing.
Shocker.
Which is, the Wi-Fi at this resort is a disaster. I was like, oh my god, it really came true.
So good. So as we kind of wrap out, I just wanted to bring up like the overall schedule, but what could be just overall playoffs. Let's start there. Is there anything you're even like thinking about? You know, it's really hard. We just talked for almost an hour about how the hell you can even implement week 17 correlations while you're drafting, and it's pretty complex. Is there anything you're even like thinking about or considering? You talked about, well, especially with week 15 in Best Ball Mania being more difficult to advance through. Is there just anything you're considering in terms of week 15 and 16, or are you looking at kind of, you know, a week 15 through 17, right? Like, oh man, they got two awesome matchups in week 15 and 16. Maybe it's not as good in 17, or just, you know, anything with the overall playoff schedule.
Yeah, I think the week 15 and 16, I mean, there's 16 team fields. And so I think in some ways, like, they're so small that maybe the correlation is like slightly less important, where you probably just want like the guys. And at the same time, I mean, like if there was no week 17, I would stack up week 16. But I think that the issue is like, at what point are you sacrificing week 17 correlation to build in some week 16 correlation? And I don't love that. There are going to be some situations where, you know, and if you're super in the spreadsheet weeds, maybe you can figure out spots where it's like, hey, if we stack up these two teams, then you also get a bonus week 16 correlation piece out of it, you know, so that, and like, hey man, that's a micro edge, but I don't mind it. I really don't.
That is some padded cell level illness.
It is.
But I have definitely thought about it.
Don't show your loved ones. Don't show your loved ones the spreadsheet where you found this. Don't do it. But
oh god, yeah. You're stacking matrix so you can build out as many game stacks over the course of the entire season, just
no
like
one
a
can
total
see it.
nerd. Yeah.
No one's allowed to see it. It's a locked spreadsheet. But is it giving you a slight edge? I think it is. I do.
I agree. I personally am not going to do. I do think, again, if you're like really being optimal, as you said, and you want to grind and figure out, I do think we might like release something when I can get some time on Spike Week, just because it won't be that difficult to see some overlapping playoff, right? This team plays each other in week 15, and then here's who they play in week 17. That won't be that difficult to do. So I do think we'll probably do something like that at Spike Week. Anyone can do that. But in terms of like optimizing for, okay, this team I'm going to rank this playoff schedule as number 1 and their week 15 game, right? And starting to match up like, okay, this team plays the Lions in week 15 and I like their matchup, and doing like really getting down into the weeds of trying to optimize for like a strength of schedule across the playoffs and pair those teams together. Technically, like, I think that could be an edge. I think it is going to get in the way, most likely, unless you're like literally a genius level coder or something like that can build a model that can tell you exactly what to do. I think that is one of those things in this particular, game of gambling, game of sports speculation, that you just might be cutting off your nose to spite your face a little bit. And I always, and this has been my career, and the only reason that I'm here today is not tried to overdo it, simple rather than difficult, and directionally accurate rather than perfectly accurate. And so I think best ball is probably the best game for that. DFS, I'm never going to beat like Brick. I'm never going to beat Brian. I'm never going to beat, Osimo. I'm never going to beat those guys because they are much more perfectly accurate than I am. Whereas I'm just striving for directional accuracy and to beat people more frequently. That's my personal mindset. In best ball, I'm not sure there is a perfectly accurate. And so if we can just be directionally accurate about a million more things than everybody else is, right? All those little micro edges Pat keeps talking about, I would just like to do that rather than get too, minute about the schedule.
Yeah, like I think, a much bigger edge is like, hey, the Commanders turned out to be good, and you have 3 Commanders. That to me is a better edge. Like now, if the Commanders end up having a really juicy playoff schedule, that will make me maybe boost them up my list of teams that I'd like to tack on, or like to kind of try to build in some correlation with, again, maybe even without the quarterback. I think there's a number of teams like where I could sort of talk myself into them being surprises. And so if I've got a team that I'm mildly interested in being a surprise and they have a really nice playoff schedule, then that'll make me more interested in that, or if there's a team where I could also see, they're like, I know this team is going to run, it's the Falcons, and the Falcons are going up against like, I guess that's a terrible example because like, are you really going to draft Bijan like what, 105? But maybe the Bears. Yeah, let's say the Bears. The Bears end up having a schedule of really like soft projected run defenses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe I'll boost Khalil Herbert up a bit or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit. Or maybe it's just like, hey, I definitely want to have exposure to the Bears backfield. I don't know. It's so ambiguous. I've been kind of avoiding it a little bit too much. I probably should be taking more Deontay Foreman and Roschon Johnson. I don't take a ton. But they have a really juicy schedule. That's going to make me wade into those waters a little bit more than I have been. I think like stuff like that. But it is kind of, if it's a micro edge, then it should have like less impact on what you do.
I totally agree.
It's enough to have a little impact, I think.
And so how I view kind of projecting matchup quality, I guess is what I would call it, right? The strength of the matchup this far out is that, of course, we're going to be wrong very frequently. But like when you take a step back, we're playing a game where we're trying to predict individual players this far out. Like that's all this game is, right? I'm trying to say on May 11th, who are going to be the best fantasy, but like they may, knock on wood, we're not hoping for this. They may not even play this season. You know what I mean? We thought Will Fuller was coming back, for a year and a half, and the guy's family hasn't even heard from him. Like, who knows? Is he alive? I don't know. But we're trying to play this prediction game as it is with players. I do think teams can be a little bit easier to predict on the very far ends. Now, injuries, of course, play out anywhere in the middle. And of course, at the high end, the Eagles could actually not be an awesome defense if like 6 guys get hurt. Sure. Right, I agree. I'm willing to accept that. But I'm pretty confident that the Eagles defense is at no point going to be like a projections boost to the person playing against them. They may end up with some injuries, neutral or fine, but like when I'm fine, I believe that somebody mentioned that the Giants play them in week 16, which is a Boston Scott game. Apparently Boston Scott torches the Giants all the time. Yeah. So if you want to get Saquon Barkley through, you have to draft Boston Scott on your Saquon Barkley teams. Is the new take. But point being, if like let's say they played in week 17, I would say this is not a great spot for Saquon Barkley. Doesn't mean I'm avoiding him because that's not the end all be all, but I would think it's not a great spot. Last year, a take that I had was the Arizona Cardinals were going to suck, particularly on defense. And I actually feel fairly vindicated in that take. But when you just like looked at the depth chart and everything, like it was putrid. Like JJ Watt was like the best player they had left, and the dude just retired. Like he was fringing on retirement. Yeah. I was him and Budda Baker. I was pretty confident in that take. Now it didn't work because Kyle Pitts got hurt. And the Falcons were a mess. But where it did work was Tyler Algier, right? And it also worked on the Cardinals side saying, well, if their defense is going to suck, okay, it got me to Trey McBride. It got me to, I was not drafting Zach Ertz, of course.
The meme of the summer.
Yes.
The meme of the summer is Zach Ertz, Tyler Algier. And it was right. I mean, that mini correlation was directionally accurate. I mean, let's not forget. The thing pointed to is this has gone too far. Almost won a ton of money.
Not only did it not go too far, it hit a goddamn bullseye. Basically, it hit a 20, not a triple 20, right? If you play darts, it didn't hit a triple 20, but it hit a goddamn 20. I'll tell you, that was a 20.
It was. That is what it was. It was a 20. It wasn't even a double 20. Yeah.
Yes.
It was a 20. It was
a 20.
Yeah, and that was the thing. And so I guess. Maybe like as a pushback, because I think you will see some pushback from Twitter and stuff of this has gone too far. This worked. This is kind of always what you get with an idea that is working is like, yes, it has worked so far and it is working and it worked in last year, but like this is it though. We've done it enough. Don't do it anymore. Don't do it any more than this from people who probably weren't using it in the first place, right? That's kind of like what you tend to see. And of course, to any edge, like you could take it too far, and I think we've spent a lot of time on ways that you could take it too far. I think
and trying to make sure you don't. Yeah, we're trying to make sure that you. I'm trying to make sure that I don't. That's why we're talking about this too.
Yeah, Levitan's framing of it, I think, is a really good framing. But your, like the thing held up last year is like this is not this. This can't work. It worked amazing. So I mean, again, not perfect because it was the wrong tight end, but yeah, I mean, I do think that we want to be building this stuff in. And one thing that I would say, to the 15-16 correlation, which again, I'm probably not going to be doing a ton of, but it is nicer than last year because of the way the advance rate works, where they're both 1 out of 16. Last year we had to go, well, week 15, are we building that in? Because 1 out of 10. Now they're the same. If you can get a bonus week 15, it's the same as a bonus week 16 now, right? So, your odds of making it out of either round are the exact same. So you might as well tack on either if either's available to you. And I think that gives you that little extra flexibility. So at least you don't have to and it's one less thing to have to think through. Like, well, this is a 15. Is that worth anything? Like at least now the answer is yes, it's worth what a 16 is.
Right. Exactly. And to your point on the you're going to get pushed back. Two things. It is always very funny because it will be the people who are attached to last year's results from like a player and a team perspective, not fantasy player, like an NFL, the Bears, what do you mean? The Bears ran all the time. This is on top of my mind because I was looking at DJ Moore this morning because I know a lot of people were not so high on DJ Moore, which is totally fine. I also think the Bears are probably going to run a lot, but that doesn't mean that it's a certainty.
Leone got to me. I learned him in my ranks. The math nerd came over and said, let's review this, Pat. Let's review this. Where are the targets coming from? I was like, oh, yeah, you're probably right.
I totally understand. And from a median perspective, I totally agree. I have zero pushback on like negative sentiment towards DJ Moore. But the point is, those people that you're outlining will probably be the guys like, you can't draft DJ Moore. Didn't you see how much the Bears ran last year? And I'm like, well, part of why I might draft DJ Moore is because if they don't, right? If last year doesn't play out this year doesn't play out exactly how last year played out, right? There's reasons to believe that could change, blah, 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 blah. So those people will be very attached to last year's results, but then they'll say, because they didn't believe in it in the first place, it just happened last, I know Pat won with that last year, but that, it's luck. That was a sun run. He got lucky, right? This year, I'm not worried about it. It's not gonna, yeah, of course. Welcome to winning tournaments with a million teams in them. But the other thing that you said that I thought was so true, and this is how I feel like passionately, especially about this show and some of the shows that we do that sometimes get really in the weeds and into some nerdy best ball stuff, is that in life, anything that eventually becomes the big new idea was not assumed to be true originally, and generally frowned upon, and people threw stones at it, right? Week 17, all this week 17 type stuff, just last year, smart people were like, you guys have taken this way too far. This is nonsense. You can't predict that. Just draft the best players, right? Just smart people. God forbid 2 years ago when we first started doing this. Last year, now slowly people are like, okay, I get it. We got to be smart about it, but I'm starting to see it. And in 5 years, where are we going to be at with like some of this correlation and stuff? And so it's going to take time.
I honestly think in 5 years, it's going to be like tough to get correlation, because you're going to be like competing with, let's say you have, I need to think of an example where the ADPs lined up, but like you've got, you're going to be competing with guys who have the other wide receiver that you're. So let's say you have Joe Burrow, okay, and you've got him stacked up with T Higgins. Then I think in 5 years, like you'll be able to pull that off, but you're competing with the Jamar Chase drafter,
right,
to get Tyler Boyd and Irv Smith. Like I actually think, or you're competing with the Jamar Chase drafter and whoever, in this case, the Chiefs drafter. So there's like two other people in that room who are intelligently trying to build something that you're competing against. So I think in 5 years, it's just going to be hard to get really highly correlated teams. So, and, maybe you could definitely overdo this, not just in terms of reaching and stuff, but there probably is a point at which you don't want to have like show up to the final and you have a bet on like 2.5 teams. You know 100%. What I mean? Like that, that could be bad, but I don't know. In some ways, like I kind of like going into the puppy and being like, I'm going to really correlate this thing. Let's experiment a little bit with this $5 entry and see like how far feels like too far. And you can kind of mess around that way, but yeah, I think in like 3 to 5 years, just like the amount of really correlated teams will probably be reduced because everyone's trying to add a little here and there.
That it's funny that you said with the puppy. That's actually what I did and what I might do in the DraftKings Millie this year. Now they did make the payout structure really, really nice, so there's a little less incentive to doing it in terms of like top heaviness. Like, dude, you finish in the top 100, you get 10 grand. So like, there's a little less incentive to like go crazy at first place, but still, it's $1 million, so I probably will. But that's what I did. I was like, I'm over correlating the shit out of this because there's 1,000 teams in the final. I did get a team through. Of course, it was led by Jalen Hurts and Trevor Lawrence, who basically both didn't play in week 17, right? So that it didn't hit, but I was like, get me a team or two to the final. just have all these correlations and pray to God the correlations come through for me, especially because of how big that final was. And so that was definitely my strategy. What I was going to say about in the 5 years thing, it felt like for anyone that's played playoff best ball, it felt like the perfectly efficient version of that, which would be in a perfectly efficient playoff best ball room. Everybody is drafting kind of in their own lane, except for the teams that, right, I took Jamar Chase and the next guy took T. Higgins. They're duking it out for Joe Burrow, or vice versa. Right. You took Joe Burrow, right? There's only a handful of different teams that are duking it out for similar players, right? Or because secondary stacks are a thing, right? So just because you have Mahomes doesn't mean you don't want Chiefs, or just because you don't have Mahomes doesn't mean you don't want Chiefs, because you're trying to plan for these, scenarios in playoff best ball. But that's kind of what you're outlining, is everyone will stay in their lane when they're supposed to stay in their lane, but there's always going to be teams trying to cross, right? This team's trying to exit, this team's trying to get over here, or we're both trying to hit the same exit, and we're both in the fast lane, right? We're both in the fast lane, but we're both trying to exit, and we can't both get there at the same time. And so I think that's a really interesting way to think about it, and I think that's probably how I would like the perfectly efficient form of playoff best ball.
Yeah. And there is obviously going to be room in 5 years for like, well, this guy's just way better than that guy, so who cares if he's correlated? We'll continue having that part of the discussion for a long time, but yeah, I think like if you want to build some like really correlated teams, I would say like do it. Like don't make it your whole portfolio. Keep it like as an experimental element of what you're doing, but and maybe weight that towards the lower stakes stuff that you're doing, so that you're kind of like truly experimenting. But like if you had a few Best Ball Mania entries that were like really tightly correlated, I think it's fine, and also might be the type of thing where 2 or 3 years from now it's like super hard to do that. So do it while you can.
All right, one take. Well, we'll get into the player weeds and get our hand in the dirt for 1 second. Everybody's going to be excited for Chiefs Bengals. If you had to pick one player in that game that you were actually going to kind of take a stand on, or and this could be, I don't care if you say Jamar Chase, but it could be ADP value, one of the quarterbacks, whatever. Who would be like if someone said, I do want to go a little bit heavier on that game, how can I do it in a smart way? Which player from either the Chiefs or the Bengals would you tell somebody to kind of get overweight on?
Well, so I had what I thought last night at chip chasing. I was like kind of like, oh, this is a really smart point. And then I went and I listened to a podcast that's been out for like 2 weeks with Mike Leone and Justin Herzig talking about stuff, and like Leone made the same point like 2 weeks ago. I was like, so
I hate when that happened.
Yeah, his point was that if you take Joe Mixon, then you can draft your team like he's a 3rd round running back, because he's either gonna be there and gonna be Joe Mixon. I mean, maybe he gets suspended, but if he gets suspended, he might get cut. So it like sort of all comes crumbling down. Like if he gets suspended where he's going, you're probably not surviving that. Right. So you already made the minute you take him, you've made the bet he's not getting suspended and he's not getting cut. Well, now you've gotten like 3 to 4 rounds of ADP value, depending on when you grab him. Probably 3, like 6 to 3rd. So, and he's also potential leverage on the game, where the game hits, but it's because Burrow throws for a lot of yards, but Mixon gets all the touchdowns. He scores 3 touchdowns, and we've seen him do that. I'm not a big Mixon guy, but he's done that before. And I think he's still he isn't like slowing down. I think he's still got some juice. He's still kind of the same guy he's always been. So he would be an interesting way to play it right now, especially because we are going to find out, somewhat soon what the deal is with Mixon, and that will resolve in, again, a very binary way. Like he's either going to be going 3 rounds earlier in drafts or way, way later. So, he's sort of an interesting way to attack that game. And then you can always bring back Chiefs pieces. I mean, bringing back Chiefs pieces is the easy part. So, a Mixon, Rashee Rice, a Mixon, Skyy Moore, a Mixon, Marcus Valdes-Scantling. I mean, that's super easy. So, that, not to steam up Mixon because I don't really have enough. I drafted some big board of him, but I was kind of probably being a little too scared. I don't think I only drafted 4 Best Ball Manias or so far, and it's been a lot of puppy stuff. But yeah, I think I'm going to try to get some Mixon once the schedule comes out and I'm doing Best Ball Mania again.
Yep, I love the Mixon call. It's one of those where he's not Deshaun Watson level, but it's one of those where I'm not trying to go out here and like flag plant this like human scum. You know what I mean? So like, and the argument always has to be like on show. You're like, I know what he did was fucked up, but the NFL's not going to do anything about it. And you have to like make this case as to why he's not going to jail or whatever. And it's like, that's just not very fun. And I don't like that, but I have been pretty much very pro Mixon in drafts from the big board or whatever. I mean, he was going outside the top 100 in the big board.
And I started taking him there. And then I got nervous he was going to get suspended again. And yeah, my takes are based on the way I'm drafting. So as much as, I don't want to be putting my stamp on, draft Joe Mixon, like I am planning to draft Joe Mixon.
Yep. So. Same. And like also some people would make the case he is regressing. He's not 23-year-old Joe Mixon anymore, but like Bengals running backs are a fantasy gold mine. Efficiency be damned. Joe Burrow is a check down artist. He runs a smidge, but doesn't run a ton. And he gets the ball out like when it's not there, right? When they run a kind of a unique offense, actually. When he gets one-on-one on the outside, or they get to too high shell and they're running some kind of vertical on the outside, he doesn't really like stick with Tyler Boyd to see if Tyler Boyd's getting open very often. It's like, Chase, they're bracketing Chase or they're bracketing T. It's like, okay, they got too high. I'm going to get my 4 or 5 yards down to my running back. Like Mixon and Kerrane both catch a ton of passes, even though Kerrane was playing on passing downs. Mixon still catches a ton of passes. Now, I'm not saying he's going to play on passing downs this year, but like he could play a little bit more. It's Chase Brown and Travion Williams and Chris Evans behind him, and like even if he doesn't, he's been going in the second round for years in this kind of early down role in that offense. It's kind of like as much of a potential suspension and a running back can be. It's almost like a tiny miss, in where he's going. So
it could be a catastrophic miss. So I would definitely like keep it. I wouldn't be like hammering Joe Mixon in your Best Ball Mania portfolio because that.
You mean with suspension? You mean with
the suspension risk? Yeah. So you do want to. I think you want to look back in
prison risk. Yeah, I was like Alvin Kamara. Yeah.
We don't want prison risk. I think you want to be, and it's you don't want to look back at your 2023 season and be like, wow, I was super overweight Joe Mixon and that was a disaster. Like I'd still want to be in a position where I could be like extremely underweight Mixon, even though I took him a little. Yeah. I'll probably do another. I guess I got to plan out how many drafts I'm doing, but maybe like another 10 drafts through the end of May or something. Mm-hmm. And if I had him on like half of those, that'd be kind of interesting.
And I think now is a good time to do it because
maybe a third.
His price is not right. So this is what I was also gonna say as it relates to like DJ Moore. I think what gets missed in best ball specific. I actually would not take DJ Moore in my season long managed like home league because he's a player, and I think Mixon is this. His price is not right. It can't be right. He is either underpriced because he's not suspended and they don't bring somebody else in, right, et cetera, or he is either like shouldn't be drafted or is so overpriced that it's the worst price on the board because he gets suspended or whatever, right? His price can't be efficient. I'm not saying that the Bears situation is the same, but we often have a lot of these. The 49ers quarterbacks are this way. But if the Bears run like they ran last year and they're as poor of a passing team as they were last year, DJ Moore and Justin Fields, frankly, prices are not right. They're overpriced. But there is a scenario which we have seen a lot of times actually over the course of recent NFL history where team is really run heavy. They can't throw. The quarterback is young and maybe not totally ready to take that leap yet. And then they bring in a really good wide receiver. They bring in offensive talent. They booster the offensive line, etc. And that guy takes the leap and they throw more and they throw successfully. Josh Allen did this. Lamar Jackson did this. And just recently, Jalen Hurts did this. It happens a lot more than you think. It's just there's only so many of those quarterbacks that ever come into play. We have no idea if the sample size is relevant or predictive or whatever. But in that sense, right, if Justin Fields and DJ Moore are the next Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, they're underpriced. Stephon Diggs should be going where CeeDee Lamb goes or something like that, right? Now, you have to weigh probabilities and all of that. And so I totally get that. But like the 49ers quarterbacks are like the Joe Mixon. Someone is underpriced, and someone shouldn't be getting drafted.
I actually don't agree with that one because I think that it could be a lot of them play throughout the course of the season.
Right.
So
in
which case, just give me the pass catchers.
The odds, and that is totally fair. But when we get to the results, someone is not correctly priced, in my opinion, on the 49ers because someone is going to get the first shot, and either that was by injury from Purdy and Lance is just horrible, or Purdy. Like, what if Purdy's ready for week 1 in the starter?
He's not properly priced.
He is not correct. He's not even close. It's not even.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't love him. Now we just don't know. We have no freaking idea. So that's why they go where we go. But the price is not efficient. And so anyway, I was just going to add one chief.
Yes.
One chief to your Mixon thing, and it's fitting. I wanted to bring this up because it's a Skyy Moore fade. But if Skyy Moore had not got this is cheating. If he had not gotten drafted by the Chiefs and or we had not kind of steamed him up because we were excited about the young second round pick, where would Rashee Rice go in drafts if Skyy Moore hadn't happened? Do you think?
I think he would end up in the 8th or 9th round where Skyy Moore went.
And he's in
probably,
the 130s or
probably more like
the
9th because there's not a ton to fall in love with in terms of Rashee Rice's prospect profile. He's just a second round pick that the Chiefs took.
Right.
So I would say maybe it'd be more like 9th or 10th as opposed to like the 7th, 8th that we got from Skyy Moore. I think there is something to kind of the industry at large and, a certain Wednesday night show hyping the ever living shit out of him. I don't think that hurts his ADP, right? So,
right.
I don't think you'll get that with Rice. I don't think there's like a Rice contingent that's just going to be playing highlight reels for the dude. But yeah, I think he'd be in the 9th or 10th round, just as hey, uncertain situation. Who am I fading? Kadarius Toney and Marcus Valdes-Scantling? Give me the second round pick.
And
maybe he'll end up there anyway. I think we might just decide, yeah, screw it, I'm taking him in the 9th. I agree with you. The Skyy Moore is a fade right now, but only because, not only because, it was a pretty disastrous rookie year. But one of the reasons is that if you want to be overweight Skyy Moore, or just want to be even with Skyy Moore or whatever, you're going to have a chance to get him cheaper than this.
That's my thought. Yep.
He's just going to fall. There's no way. I've been in situations because I have my ranks on Legendary Upside, which you can upload, and I've been drafting off of them. And one of the things that's been tough for me is that I have Rice ahead of Skyy Moore in the ranks, but Skyy Moore's ADP has been ahead of Rice. So I'm well, if I'm trying to pull a stack off, I should actually be taking Skyy Moore and then trying to get Rice on the comeback. But because I took Rice one time and Skyy Moore went immediately, and I was like, I probably screwed that up. But I think that flips. I don't think a lot of people are going to have Skyy Moore ranked ahead of Rice. So I don't think I changed it in my ranks either. I think I moved them a little closer so that Moore wasn't way down the list and you could make that decision if you wanted. But I think Skyy Moore is going to fall.
And this is a situation where I'm also cheating a little bit, and that I kind of want to draft both of these guys to when it makes sense to draft both.
Yeah, when it makes both sense, and it makes sense to draft Rice now and Moore later.
Exactly, because I was doing the cheating with the Skyy Moore thing with the what would happen with Rice if Skyy wasn't there. But that's part of the point, is that we have a second round wide receiver with zero truly logical impediments to if we're all wrong. And I hated Rice. I could not believe they drafted him, particularly with the other players that were on the board.
Did you see the slow-mo hype video on Twitter?
Yes.
He looks, I mean, I know it's in slow-mo, but he looks
so
slow.
He is. He's like
it wasn't impressive at all.
I just don't get it.
Your running form looks weird.
I guess Mahomes wanted him or something, whatever. The Chiefs are like the Patriots in evaluating these skill position players, apparently. But I'm willing to admit to the fact that I can be wrong and the Chiefs could be right. And it also could not matter whether I'm right, they're wrong, or whatever, because I think MVS sucks. And guess what? When everybody else was out, he carried them in the playoffs for a game. But like, that's just what happens when you're attached to Patrick Mahomes, right? Exactly. And so you have a second round pick, remove the name, remove our opinions of him, who has a former second round pick who was atrocious as a rookie, who has Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, who hasn't stayed healthy or earned snaps in his entire NFL career, and Richie James. And Justin Ross, who has one leg. Like, what? There's nothing stopping this guy really from getting there, you know? And so I'm just going to kind of take that stand now. And then I agree that Skyy will probably fall. And then I can get my Skyy when I think he's a little bit more appropriately priced. And I'm mostly just worried about the Toney price, where I think I'm not going to get any good prices on Kadarius Toney, even though I actually want to make that bet. So anyway, I just wanted to wrap with kind of some thoughts around the most fun game of Week 17. What do you got coming up today in the coming days? What's coming out with Leg Up?
So on Leg Up, you can check out an article that I just did. I referenced it earlier on Elite Tight End. It's a pretty long article. It's like a 6,000 word article, but you know, one of the perks of being a Legendary Upside subscriber is that there is a premium podcast feed where I narrate the post. So if you want to just, listen to the article as a podcast, you can. It's, I'm reading it like I am the guy who wrote it. So I've kind of got the emphasis, the points that I'm making. There's a lot of charts in it that I kind of explain, but you can actually pull it up and, look at the charts as I read it. If you're kind of an audio type of person like I am. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with that piece. I think it makes a pretty strong case for elite tight end as a very underutilized strategy this year. Prices have fallen on these tight ends compared to last year. There's a narrative that was basically the entire position was disgusting outside of Kelsey last year. And I think that is true when you look at advance rates, but it's not true when you look at winning the tournaments. The drafters winner, the drafters weeks 1 through 17 most points was a Kittle team. It wasn't a Kelsey team. Kelsey was the regular season. Yeah, Kelsey was on the regular season winner, King Cat for underdog, but and he was on a number of other winning teams. But Kittle was on a lot of the winning teams as well as on my team. But he was also, the fact that he was on the drafters team, I think, is pretty eye-opening. Just showing you the fact that he had 3 spike weeks, 2 came in the playoffs, which was absolutely massive for playoff tournaments, but it was just absolutely massive full stop because there's not that many spike weeks at the tight end position. And Andrews had 3, Kelsey had 3, and Kittle had 3 last year. There were only 22 in total. So they combined for 41% of all the tight end spike weeks. That's 20 plus half PPR points is what I used to define that. Hawkinson, who was an early but not elite tight end, had another 2. So those 4 guys combined for half of them. Hayden Winks has put out research showing that, this is a phenomenon, that basically there's not that many spike weeks and the elites do actually capture a huge share of them. So, and Madison Parkell, who I referenced in the article, one of his articles just talks about when you're trying to win 3 straight uncorrelated single week tournaments, the odds that one of these elite tight ends goes off is actually fairly high. It's like 85, 90% that someone's going to do it. So if your portfolio is underweight that build, you're actually making a fairly big fade stance against all of those elite tight ends. Now, it's not that fun to say draft all the elite tight ends and 3 of them are absolutely going to torch your advance rates, but we're trying to finish. There's like 600,000 plus people in Best Ball Mania. Like, you're not going to like make, you're lucky to get 1 team into the finals, so you're very lucky to get 1 team into the finals. So I think building ways that are going to actually increase your chances of getting to the finals. And I think this is one of those ways. I think is well worth a little bit of a ding to advance rate. So as you can tell, I dove pretty deep into that. I also am working on some quarterback research as well, talking about, the elite quarterback landscape, ways we can attack that. I've got some work I'm doing on ways to spend your last round picks. So starting to have a little bit more time to write and getting some of that rolling out now.
That is awesome. And that is one thing I love. I mean, about a lot of the smart people, like the people you mentioned, love Hayden, love Madison's work and everything. There's tons of other people that I can't shout every single person out. But I admittedly, before I had dug, like, you can't dig into every single possible thing over the course of the entire offseason. I was one of the people saying, my God, man, tight end was just so bad. I don't want any of these guys. And I am the idiot who falls in love with some of these late round tight ends every year that bust. Like, I'm a Trey McBride guy. I'm a Isaiah Likely guy. I'm a, Sam Laporta is one of my favorite tight ends. Like, I fall in love with these guys. I'll own it. And I'm burning money. But I was kind of the belief, like, well, now this year in particular, there's really less opportunity cost. And it was viewed through the lens, like you were talking about. Yeah, advance rates were worse. Generally speaking, tight end was terrible across the board. So why would I take the guy in the 4th round when there's guys later who make up the, keep it close enough? And then when someone like you digs in, and even like when you first started to mention it, not today, but when I think I heard you mention it before, I was like, your episode with Pete, you mentioned it, and I hadn't read the article yet, and I was like, I don't believe you. You're like, I don't. Is he right? I'm like, that can't be right. And then I read your piece and I do some digging on my own, and it kind of totally changed how I view the tight end position. And so I totally couldn't recommend that piece more, and just obviously then everything that Pat is putting together. We just started here at Spike Week, something I'm pretty excited about, and it's really completely on the opposite end of the sicko scale that Pat, the content that Pat was just breaking down. If you're new to playing best ball, right, you just listened to this for an hour and a half, and some of the subjects may go a little bit over your head. We try to break it down as much as we can, but I know that not everybody is a complete, best ball expert. I mean, I'm not even an expert. We've just been playing it for a long time. We're starting a series called How to Win at Best Ball. We released the first, it's both written and a video series here on our YouTube channel. I do actually believe that it's good for both seasoned players and new players. It's obviously geared for new players, but having kind of taking a step back, even as more of an experienced player, I find can be really, really helpful, particularly at this point in the season. And the first video kind of goes through, we're calling the rules. So, what is a playoff format? What is a cumulative format? What is this Best Ball Mania 4 thing, that they have now? How's scoring different on the different sites? How are the rosters different on different sites? And all of that. And it helped me, even as a person who's literally creating best ball content constantly. So we're going to have a 5-part series that should help new players get up to speed, and maybe advanced players kind of just like sharpen their baseline skills a little bit. So excited for that. Check that out. Obviously, check out Legendary Upside. And if you are not subscribed to Legendary Upside, what are you doing? And if you are subscribed to Legendary Upside, make sure you take advantage of that 40% off discount here at Spike Week. It's a pretty perfect little marriage. You can go draft your elite tight ends. You upload them onto Spike Week. You can see all your elite tight end teams.
You can see how much the elite tight end build was, which, by the way, was my number one build last year. More than, hero running back, zero running back, double anchor, all that. Elite tight end was the thing I took the biggest stand on of all my structures. And I know that because whenever Spike Week.
Exactly. That's actually like probably my favorite part, is seeing all the different structures, because like you feel like you're a zero RB bro, and then I got to like July of last year and I'm like, what are all these double anchor running back teams doing on here? Like, I don't remember drafting those at all. So anyway,
I do black out anytime I take more than one running back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That'll do it for us today. We'll be back every single Thursday, posted both here and on Pat's YouTube channel. Enjoy the NFL schedule, and enjoy who our Lions are playing. Enjoy the Chiefs-Bengals game and all the fun that comes with that. We'll be launching some of our schedule tools here pretty shortly soon. But for Pat and for myself, We'll see you guys next week. Peace.
Woo! Those were some spicy takes. Want to stay up to date with all of the other spicy takes we're going to have over here at Spike Week? Why don't you press that subscribe button below? You turn notifications on, we draft a team, boom, you know about it. We have another spicy take, boom, you know about it. You can be there. You can draft with us. You want to stay up to date? That's how you do it. All right, we'll catch you later next time here at Spike Week.